Hey, everybody, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to give everybody just another minute because we still have a lot of people coming into the waiting room. Okay, everybody, I have a couple minutes after the top of the hour. I'm thrilled with the turnout. Thank you all for showing up. We're going to provide you with some really good information today about APHIS Veterinary Services, National Animal Disease Preparedness and Response Program, and our current funding opportunity. So I'm Julie Wallen. I am USDA Veterinary Services Coordinator for our Farm Bill program and the leader for the National Animal Disease Preparedness and Response Program, or what we call NADPRP. And I'm here today with Laura Wilson and Andrea Pegg, who are our key grant specialists for the program. And as I said, we're going to kind of step you through everything that you need to know to apply for this funding opportunity. So just a few housekeeping things. We are recording this webinar so that we can post it onto our website. If you want to go back and review any of these materials, you can visit our website next week and the recording will be there, including the slides. I also wanted to just remind you all to please keep your line muted. You're welcome to unmute to ask a question. We'd like to kind of wait to the end of each section to take questions. You can ask questions at any time during the chat. And at the end of the entire webinar, we're going to have plenty of time for some discussion and take your questions then as well. So what else? I think that's it for housekeeping. All right, so what we're going to cover today is, let me get everything rolling here. I'm going to give some introduction, just a really quick introduction about the National Animal Disease Preparedness and Response Program. And I'm going to tell you about the general information about the funding opportunity and this year's funding priority topics. Then Laura and Andrea are going to step you through kind of the logistics of how do you apply for the funding opportunity, how do you submit your application package, what do you need to submit, and what kind of things can you use the funds for. And then I'm going to take it kind of to a closing level, tell you about what happens after you submit your proposal and give you a bunch of tips on things we've learned from seeing proposals come through our program in the past, things that will really help set you up for success, and some common mistakes that you should try to avoid. So, and as I said, by the end, we'll have plenty of time for questions. So, for the most part, we're going to be turning our cameras off during the presentation part. We'll turn it back on again during the questions, but this kind of helps us save some of our bandwidth. Will keep me from my screen from freezing up and being all weird. So I'm going to take care of that part. All right. And thanks, Laura, and thanks, Andrea, for joining. I'll be transitioning to you shortly. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about the NADPRP program. I know this is old news for some of you on the call, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So the National Animal Disease Preparedness and Response Program was one of 3 programs aimed at animal health issues that was funded in the 2018 Farm Bill. And this was specifically set up to provide so that APHIS could provide funding to cooperators to support high value projects that were targeting, preventing, and preparing for and being able to respond to high consequence foreign and emerging animal disease outbreaks, and those disease threats that are most consequential to U.S. livestock and related industries. So some of the unique features of the program are that each year we have a competitive funding opportunity, and this is our 4th competitive funding opportunity. The entities through this program, we're able to partner with a lot of different kinds of eligible entities, including states, tribes, land grant universities, colleges of veterinary medicine, industry organizations, veterinary organizations, and other federal agencies. So I should mention that we're not able to provide direct funding to private entities or to industries, specific industries, but those private entities can absolutely partner with these eligible entities to submit a proposal. Because the funding was provided as Know Your Money, we typically award projects that last for between 12 and 24 months. Each year, we work with our stakeholders to identify high priority topics, and we aim each funding opportunity towards those topic areas. So I'm going to be talking in detail about this year's funding priority topics. And regardless of the year, we're always aiming the funds towards those kinds of projects and activities that will increase our nation's preparedness for high consequence emerging and foreign animal disease outbreaks. So this is just the high-level overview about the 2022 NADPRP funding opportunity. So in this funding opportunity, APHIS is going to make up to $17 million available to support new projects. This is substantially more funding than we have provided in previous years. Big important deadline, important date that you should be aware of is that the proposals are due by September 9th. And this year we are actually providing a little more time to submit proposals than in the past. Typically we've provided about 60 days for applicants to submit proposals, and this year we're providing 90. If you submit a proposal, it needs to directly support one of the 2022 funding priorities that are listed in the full announcement, and I'm going to go over those today. There's not a per project funding limit. So you could submit a proposal for, a lot of money, $1 million, that kind of scale. But I just want to caution that over the course of the program, our average award is about a $200,000 project. Applicants can submit multiple proposals, and we definitely encourage you to do that. You probably have different ideas of different things that your organization could do that are related to these funding priority topics, so you're welcome to submit multiple proposals. We do expect that the projects that are awarded in this funding cycle will start between March and April of 2023. So that's another thing to just keep in mind as you develop your proposed activities, that the project will probably start in that time frame. So this is a little recap of some important dates for you as applicants or potential applicants. As I said, the deadline is September 9th. After that, APHIS spends a couple of weeks, about 2 weeks, doing the initial screening, making sure that the proposals are eligible for review. And then we launch into the review period. And I'm going to tell you a little more about that review process later on in this webinar. In January, we expect that USDA will approve our spending plan for this funding opportunity, and we hope that by February 1, we will be notifying all applicants about their award status. And then, as I said, in that March and April next spring timeframe, we'll be executing the new cooperative agreements and projects will be starting. So now I want to get into sort of the meat of the funding opportunity, which are these funding priority topic areas. So these are what is APHIS looking to fund in this funding opportunity? So this year we've identified, and again, working with stakeholders to identify these 8 priority topic areas. I'm going to step you through just a little bit of details on each one of these, but just as an overview, please go to the full funding opportunity announcement and read the details about these priority topics. So I think that will be a great help to you. But just to give you a little thumbnail about each of these, the first priority topic is aimed at helping states and tribes develop the emergency response plans for animal disease outbreaks. So this might include emergency response plans that are a state or tribe's initial response plans when an outbreak is first detected. It might include vaccination plans. It might include plans for soliciting materials from the National Veterinary Stockpile. It could also include emergency plans for conducting animal depopulation or carcass disposal. It may also include permitted animal movement plans, that kind of thing. So The second topic area is livestock and poultry biosecurity. We have a great history in our program so far of funding some really excellent biosecurity projects and projects that will encourage producers to engage and practice really good and effective and efficient biosecurity. The third topic area is related to what we might call 3D enhance, and that's projects that will help increase our depopulation, carcass disposal, and decontamination capabilities in an outbreak situation. And decontamination definitely includes truck decontamination, like truck washes, projects related to that kind of thing, and also premises decontamination. The fourth topic area is projects that support animal movement decisions in a disease outbreak. There's a couple of topics, if you read in the funding opportunity related to this. This might include projects where entities are developing permitted animal movement processes or doing exercises on permitted animal movement processes in an outbreak situation. This topic might also include risk assessments or different kinds of analyses that would help inform decision makers about how to safely move animals in a large-scale disease outbreak. The fifth topic area is we're prioritizing funding toward projects that will enhance animal disease traceability in an outbreak. And again, have a look at the funding opportunity announcement. If this is a topic area that you think you'd like to submit a proposal in, we're particularly focused on this year on prioritizing funding to projects that will enhance traceability of animals moving through livestock markets, and that's disease traceability associated with livestock markets. Each year, we tend to focus on and put a part of our funding towards projects that look at outreach and education on all different kinds of topics related to animal disease prevention, preparedness, and response. And we also have a rich history of funding projects that are aimed at developing and delivering different kinds of training and exercises for animal ag sector responders. And this year, we're also setting aside a portion of our funding to support projects that are aimed at a few commodity-specific issues. And these include the development of sheep and goat vaccines, and also projects that will enhance and build aquatic animal disease prevention and preparedness. So those are the 8 topic areas. As I said, please go read about the details about those in the funding opportunity announcement. It's really a lot of work goes into creating these funding priority topics and specifying, you know, here's the kind of things that APHIS is really going to prioritize for funding. Here's what we hear from stakeholders that they really want the NADPRP program to support. So just a little more before we could dig into the weeds about how to actually apply for the funds. Just in general, what is APHIS Veterinary Services looking for when we're looking at or reviewing NADPRP proposals? I want to sort of give you this high-level view. We're always looking for high-value projects that address significant known gaps, problems, and areas of concern related to animal disease prevention, preparedness, and response. So make sure that your proposal is really aimed at one of those significant gaps or problems, particularly gaps or problems that have been identified through exercises or through actual disease outbreak events. We always look for projects that are building on scientifically based innovation or making really good use of existing tools or techniques, or that are building on findings from previously funded projects through the NADPRP program. We look for projects that provide benefit to many different livestock sectors. And I want to caution or just note that livestock, in the Farm Bill language, we use the Animal Health Protection Act definition of livestock, which is all farm-raised animals. So that absolutely includes poultry, aquaculture, non-traditional farm-raised animals. And we're looking also for projects that address the needs of different kinds of producers and different types of operations. For example, you know, small operations, medium operations, very large scale operations, producers in different parts of the country, producers in different niche markets. And lastly, we always look and prioritize funding to projects that are addressing the needs of high risk or underserved, non-traditional, niche, or hard to reach audiences. So that's my intro about the program and the high level details about the funding opportunity. I don't see any questions in the chat at this time. So I'm going to hand it over to Laura Wilson, who's going to walk through how to apply for NADPRP funds.
Great, thanks, Julie. We can go ahead to the next slide. USDA uses a system called EasyFed Grants to manage cooperative agreements and grants. If you think you will ever apply for any Farm Bill funding, we strongly encourage you to do the following pre-work right away to avoid any obstacles or delays during the application process. First, you should be sure to register for a sam.gov account. This process could take up to 2 weeks for your account to show up in federal systems, which is why we encourage these steps to be taken ahead of time. Also, please note there's a mandatory requirement in addition to registering with sam.gov, which is to complete the financial assistance certification report. Once you have completed those steps, you then have the information you need to create an e-authentication account. The last step is to then establish an EasyFed Grants account to be able to apply for the opportunity. Next slide. The Data Universal Numbering System, or DUNS number, is no longer needed when registering with sam.gov. Applicants are now required to have a unique entity identifier number, or UEI number. If your organization is already registered in sam.gov, then you already have been automatically assigned a UEI number and no additional actions are needed. Just a few friendly reminders. If you're a new applicant, please refer to Appendix 1 under New Applicant Information in the funding opportunity announcement for more information. Also, there's currently a known issue when registering in sam.gov where you will be required to submit an incident and cannot proceed. sam.gov will respond with additional instructions by email, so it's important to monitor the email address that is used to register. In addition, please note that sam.gov is behind on processing tickets, and the current turnaround time is around 2 weeks. Therefore, to reiterate again, we highly recommend to register in sam.gov right away. Next slide. Non-federal applicants must submit your application using the EasyFed Grant system. This slide contains links with resources to assist in learning the EasyFed Grant system. For federal applicants, you must submit your application via email to the NADPRP email. When submitting application attachments, please refer to the funding opportunity announcement, Appendix 2, Tips for Applicants, for further information. Next slide, please. Requesting access to EasyFed Grants requires a few prior steps as mentioned on the previous slides. The first step is to have a USDA Level 2 e-authentication account. And the second is to then request access to EasyFed Grants. For help with these steps, you can visit the websites listed on this slide, which can also be found in the funding opportunity announcement, Appendix 1, New Applicant Information. Next slide. I'm now going to talk about what to include in an application. For all applicants, the required documents to be included in an application package are the work plan, financial plan, the standard forms 424 and 424A. The work plan and financial plan templates are strongly encouraged to be used and can be found on the NADPRP website. For award proposals that are greater than $100,000, then 2 additional forms are required. Those forms are the certification regarding lobbying and the disclosure of lobbying activities. For award proposals claiming indirect costs, then a copy of your current and fully signed negotiated indirect cost rate agreement must be submitted. Lastly, For those states that require the single point of contact correspondence, or SPOC for short, a copy of that letter or waiver of review must be attached. All of these forms can be found on the NADPRP website. Next slide. A little more about SPOC. If your state participates in the SPOC review process, which is an executive order called the Intergovernmental Review of Federal Programs, then the letter or email from the SPOC is required as part of the application package. There's an active link to the right on this slide, which will pull up the list of states that are currently participating and the contact person. Also, remember that on the application for federal funding, Standard Form 424, Item 19, a selection of A or B is required, shown here in this picture. Next slide. As mentioned earlier, the work plan template can be found on the NADPRP website, and we strongly encourage that the template be used. The work plan is the body of your proposal, and the template gives detailed instructions for all the required information to include in your work plan. If the template is not used, all information requested in the template must still be included with the proposal. Next slide. The financial plan template can also be found on the NADPRP website. The template is an Excel file and steps you through how to lay out your budget. The work plan objectives should align with the financial plan, as well as keeping in mind that the cost categories or budget categories will also need to match up to the standard form 424A. It's important to ensure that the budget amounts and are all aligned and consistent between the work plan, financial plan, SF424, and the SF424A. Next slide. I'm now going to turn it over to Andrea, and she's going to go over a few general guidelines for using NADPRP funds.
Thanks, Laura. Next slide, please. This is a list of the most common allowable costs. More details and definitions of each item listed can be found in the Guidelines for Use of Funds document posted on the NADPRP website. In general, when trying to decide if a cost might be allowable or not, it should be reasonable, allocable, and necessary for the project completion. Please keep in mind that although an item may be listed as allowable, it must still be reviewed and approved by APHIS. Next slide. This is a list of the most common unallowable costs. Again, more details and definitions of each item can be found in the Guidelines for the Use of Funds document posted on the NADPRP website. If you have specific items that are questionable, please be sure to reach out to APHIS to discuss further. Next slide. Cost sharing or matching. There is no required cost sharing or matching for the NADPRP cooperative agreements. If a recipient does include cost sharing in their budget and it is accepted by APHIS, then the commitment of funds becomes legally binding and must be reported on the standard form 425. Next slide. Indirect costs or facilities and administrative costs are costs incurred for a common or joint purpose benefiting more than one cost objective. Applicants may charge their negotiated indirect cost rate to the applicable base or no more than 10% of total project costs, whichever is lower. Eligible entities must notify sub-applicants of the limit on indirect costs. The combined indirect costs of both the eligible entity and the sub-applicant may not exceed 10% of the total requested federal funds. An applicant must submit a current fully negotiated indirect cost rate agreement when indirect costs are assessed in the budget. If APHIS does not receive that agreement, then no indirect costs can be claimed. Next slide, please. To sum up the guidelines for using NADPRP funds, all costs in a work plan must be reasonable, necessary to the project goals, and should leverage existing recipient resources such as personnel, vehicles, and computers where possible to achieve cost effectiveness. So while sending your project team to Hawaii may sound like a fantastic idea, it is probably not reasonable. I'll now pass this back to Julie to explain about submitting your proposal.
right, thanks a lot, Andrea. So what I wanted to step through now before we just open it up for question and answers is I want to spend a little time talking with you about the proposal review process so that you understand how your submitted proposal will be evaluated, because I think that will help you in developing a good proposal. And then I want to talk about some of the success factors and some of the sort of pitfalls that you should avoid. So the review process is basically we have an initial screening, as I described earlier, where we simply verify the initial eligibility of a proposal. And then we get into the real bulk of the review process, which is where we have subject matter experts score, discuss, and rank the proposals in each topic area, and then make their final recommendations. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about those subject matter experts, who they are, and the criteria that they use in the next few slides. After that, the review teams go through that process. USDA has an opportunity to also review the recommended proposals, finalize the decision, and then they approve an overall NADPRP spending plan. And then the last step is applicant notification, which is where we have a public announcement of the spending plan, and we publish the list of funded projects. And then we also notify each individual applicant by email. So who reviews NADPRP proposals? So just really briefly, the reviewers are subject matter experts in different areas of animal disease preparedness and response. In particular, for each of the topic areas, we select reviewers who may be experts in those areas. And these experts are nominated by stakeholder representatives who serve on our NADPRP consultation board, and they may also be represented by APHIS. I think the thing that I really want to tell you about the reviewers is they're subject matter experts, very similar to many of you who are in the audience in this webinar. We don't review proposals by machines. We don't run them through any kind of system that has artificial intelligence or fancy algorithms. These are real people who are reading and assessing your proposal, and they will read these proposals multiple times and have several meetings about different proposals. So, and these reviewers are also tasked with helping USDA to identify high value proposals. So they're really earnest in that task, and they work hard to identify projects that are really going to deliver a lot of tangible value to address critical concerns related to emerging and foreign animal disease response activities. So just keep that in mind as you develop your proposal. So the criteria, there are 5 scoring criteria, and they each have several different components. But the first one is whether or not the proposal clearly, strongly, and directly supports one of the funding priority topics. And it may support multiple funding priority topics. That's perfectly fine. But again, this is where the importance of reading those funding priority topics in the announcement are really key. The second criteria is the extent to which the proposal addresses a critical need, for example, a gap or a known issue that's related to emerging or FAD preparedness and response. The third criteria is the feasibility of success of the project. And I'll mention that feasibility will include, an appropriate schedule, a reasonable budget, a clear and logical approach, a clear list of activities that will be conducted. Those are the kinds of things that they're looking with feasibility. And also included in feasibility are partnerships and collaborations. And is this applicant planning to reach out to certain key audiences that will help add to the success of the project? All that goes into feasibility. The fourth criteria is impact and value of the project's deliverables and expected outcomes to stakeholders. So reviewers, again, really this is a lot of their discussion is around, what kind of value is this project going to provide? And it may be to a broad audience or even to a very specific audience. Either is fine. And the last one is cost effectiveness. And that includes, is the budget really reasonable? Are the different items in the budget justifiable and needed to complete those deliverables and outcomes. So those were the criteria, and I'm going to just run through a few tips before we open it up for questions. So the first of these are really kind of simple checklist things. So first, do make sure that your application package is complete. It won't make it past the initial screening phase if it's not complete. Also make sure that your title is descriptive. I know that's maybe not a very clear guideline there, but don't submit a proposal that's called my state's NADPRP plan. Describe a little bit about what it's doing, maybe if it's specific to a livestock sector or several livestock sectors, make sure that's clear in the title. If it's focused on an activity like biosecurity or depopulation or animal movement decisions, just include that in the title. It really helps the reviewers. For your project description, make sure that's concise and it addresses the prompts. Now, what does that mean? It means that in the work plan template, which Laura mentioned, so you'll all go to our website and look at our work plan template. Even if you don't use the template, we're asking you to include all the information that's asked in the template. But the project description asks for a few specific things that include what's the project purpose, what are the activities to be performed, and what are the deliverables and expected outcomes, and who are the intended beneficiaries of that project. So, and again, this is all described in the work plan template, but make sure that your project description is really well written. So spend a little time on that. In general, make sure that your work plan is well organized, complete, and that it's not more than 25 pages long. You can add appendices. So if you need to provide, substantiating information, put it in an appendix, and that can be submitted as an additional attachment. And lastly, just make sure that your numbers add up on your different forms and submission pages. So we ask for your budget total on the work plan. We ask for your budget total on the financial plan and also on the SF 424. If those are different numbers, it makes it really hard for us in the review process to understand how much money is being requested. All right, so another tip area is, as I've indicated going through this, your proposal is going to be reviewed by a group of reviewers who are assigned to a specific topic area. And that means that when you submit your proposal, you have to pick one topic area that your proposal most strongly supports. But I realize that many proposals might touch on a number of different areas, especially your proposal may include an outreach and education component or a training and exercise component. So I ask that you submit your work plan and pick the one topic that your proposal most strongly supports. But rest assured that if your proposal addresses multiple topics, you can tell us about that. There's an other information part of your work plan. Please mention it in there. And also rest assured that because there are real people reviewing these proposals, they're very aware of, if they're in a review team and they're looking at a proposal that was submitted for traceability, but they see, oh, this is really a huge outreach and education component, as the review coordinators will share that also with the outreach and education reviewers. So don't fret too much about that, but just submit your work plan or your proposal, the body of your proposal, and align it with one of the priority topic areas. All right, I'm going to go through a couple of success factors, and these are really what we've heard from reviewers in the past about, the things that just make them automatically score a proposal really highly. The first of these is, if a proposal is very strongly supportive of one of the funding priority topics, that will yield a really high scoring proposal. Also, if reviewers can read the project description and the objectives all by themselves and get a pretty good understanding of the project, that's a really good sign of a good proposal. So just have a look at that when you're developing your proposal, and before you submit it, say, oh, if I didn't know anything about this and I just read the description and the objectives, could I at least get a pretty good sense of what the applicant's trying to do? A really good success factor is a proposal that really does a good job of describing the deliverables and outcomes and how those things are going to benefit stakeholders. And the reviewers also look for proposals that leverage and build on existing knowledge or resources that are already available. So an example here is that reviewers don't like, they tend to not score very highly those proposals that seem to be reinventing the wheel, like, oh, you know, we're going to build an educational program or develop, say, educational materials that the reviewers know are already widely available from a different resource. So just, again, keep those things in mind. A few other success factors: make sure that your approach section in your work plan is logical and that it's clear what kinds of activities are going to be done and how the succession, you know, the successive steps of those activities are going to lead to the proposed deliverables and outcomes. Make sure that your project costs are reasonable relative to the value and impact of the project. Make sure that, as I said earlier, that your proposal describes collaborations or consultations that help the reviewers understand that, oh, you know, this applicant has really considered who the end user is for this product or who their audience is, and they're in the process of doing this project, they're going to consult with those people. That's just something that reviewers really like to see. And lastly, reviewers also really love to see in the proposal how the results are going to be shared with those beneficiaries or the stakeholders who'll use the end products or the outcomes. So again, all things to keep in mind. Sort of contrary to that, these are some of the pitfalls that we see, not really mistakes, but just some of the problems or some of the scenarios where we see reviewers don't score proposals very highly. So one of these is we might receive a proposal that's really well written, but it focuses on a topic that's just tangential at best to the funding priorities. So, you know, every year we get a beautifully written proposal that everybody thinks is a great idea and should be funded, but it just doesn't have anything to do with the NADPRP program or the NADPRP funding priorities. So that's just a common mistake. Another one that we see and that reviewers really spend a lot of time talking about is a proposal might strike the reviewers as too expensive relative to the benefit it's going to provide. So in those situations, we might see reviewers who decide, well, instead of funding that $1 million project, we're going to fund these 3 lesser cost projects because then we get 3 projects finished instead of just 1. So this is hard to find. It's not, or hard to address. It's not to say that we don't want to, you know, we understand that some projects really take a lot of money, you know, fair enough. But do make sure that, you know, that the costs are appropriate for the benefits and that the reviewers will take it that way. And I think, you know, I hope I'm describing just sort of a common sense approach of how the reviewers view this. Another sort of thing to consider and a pitfall is a proposal might spend a lot of time describing an important problem or critical need, but the reviewers don't really see how the approach or the deliverables are going to mitigate that problem. And lastly, we sometimes see proposals that don't fare very well in the review process because they don't provide enough evidence to convince the reviewers that the deliverables or the outcomes are really going to be used by stakeholders or really going to be very beneficial for stakeholders. So again, just things to keep in mind. All right, so now we're going to wrap it up. At this point, we just want to sort of recap where the resources are to help you apply for funds. We've been referencing throughout this our NADPRP website. There's a lot of information out there for you, so I encourage you to go there to find the site. You can go to aphisUSDA.gov and search for National Animal Disease Preparedness and Response Program. You can also just go to Google and search on USDA, APHIS, NADPRP, and it will bring you to our site. So our website includes a lot of information for applicants, including the full funding opportunity announcement, frequently asked questions. We have our guidelines on use of funds out there. We have the work plan template and financial plan template that you'll want to look at before you submit your application packages. We have links to all the forms that you need to your application package. And we're going to include these slides from this webinar and also our webinar recording. Now, I'm glad to take your questions now, but I'm sure that as you get started on your proposals, questions will come up. So don't hesitate. We really are here to help you. So the best first line thing to do if you have a question is to send us an email at vs.nadprep@usda.gov, and then we can direct your question to the right person on our team. After that, we might email a response to you if it's easy, or just let us know if you want us to give you a call. We're happy to do that too. So with that, that is the end of everything we wanted to present today, and we are ready to take your questions. So if you'd like to ask a question, please unmute your line. We're going to stay on the line for a little while here to make sure that everyone has an opportunity. You're also very welcome to enter a question into the chat box. And I do see a question in the chat box, and that's a really good one. Would NADPRP fund projects that collect samples from farms, such as fecal samples, and assess associations between pathogens and biosecurity? I think that sounds like a really good idea. And in general, it sounds like the type of project that, yes, NADPRP would fund. So when it comes, if you'll read the section on biosecurity projects and what we're prioritizing there in the funding opportunity announcement, you'll see that it includes projects that will enhance biosecurity methods. And that kind of study might very well fit into that category. So yeah, I think so. All right, just reading here in the chat box. Is there a desired balance between research of a different approach versus actions that are designed to achieve a goal? That's a good question, Frank. Is there a desired balance between research of a different approach versus actions that are designed to achieve a goal?
Yeah, and I don't know if you need clarification of that.
I mean, go right ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm just hearing from a bunch of the things you portrayed, the sense that there's more, this is more action oriented of, oh, we're going to do this with producers to accomplish something, or we're going to gather a bunch of people to do something, which I think is different than we're going to explore something that, what motivates producer responses. So one is more research and the other is more action oriented to prepare producers better. And I didn't hear a sense of if there's a desired balance between those somewhat divergent activities.
Yeah.
One is to discover something, the other is to accomplish something. And there were multiple places in there where you were talking about what the reviewers are looking for. And, is it really going to accomplish something with the stakeholders? Well, if it's more research oriented, then you may or may not actually achieve something because you're developing something new that might achieve something later.
Yeah.
So
I'm so glad that you verbalized that, because I understand much better what you're asking. And I do think that that NADPRP can fund both, and that we have a history of funding both. We do have a little more leaning towards those tangible outcomes, those action item things, but we definitely have a history of having a portfolio of our money each year going to those kind of research projects. For example, and I should mention that on our NADPRP website, there's a long list of all the projects that we funded in the past. And I know it's kind of tedious to go through that, but I think you'll see that there are some projects in there that are more research based. They're looking at for example, last year, we funded a project on what are producer behaviors and attitudes and perspectives that, and how do those lend themselves, or how do they align with the use of biosecurity practices, or what can we learn from that to encourage better biosecurity practices? So we've done several things that I think are more on the research side, to discovery part of things, rather than just that sort of action-based outcomes. Does that help?
Yes, it does. That's so you shouldn't be bashful about
No.
if you had a project in mind that's, I'm not talking rocket science here, but there's a difference between exploring what motivates a producer versus going out and trying to motivate a producer. And so the one is directed very specifically, oh, I'm going to motivate these producers. Oh, go get them, Tiger. And the other is like, yeah, so why don't producers respond?
Yeah.
And that's more research oriented.
Yeah.
But you didn't in the course of that necessarily accomplish a shift in producer perspective. And when I was listening to the presentation, I was thinking, oh, well, if you're not shifting something, they're not going to like it. They
Yeah.
don't want to fund research. So
No.
you've answered that. Yeah. You like both.
Yep. Okay. All right, great questions coming into the chat box here. Anne, you asked, are projects focusing on building animal disease detection resources like lab capacity allowable? They're really not, but I'm going to direct you, the Farm Bill, this Farm Bill Section 12101 also funded the NALN, the National Animal Health Laboratory Network, and they have a funding opportunity that's open right now. You can go to our NADPRP website and scroll to the bottom and you'll see a link to NALN, and it'll go to the NALN page and tell you about that. And they are definitely have an open competitive funding opportunity right now where they're providing Farm Bill funds to building towards projects that will build animal disease detection capabilities and capacity in laboratories. So check that out. All right, Lee. Would NADPRP fund projects that develop artificial intelligence tools to detect animal disease in an early manner? That's a great question. I think that's with it, that might be within scope of NADPRP. I think I'm afraid I'm going to have to give you a more generic answer because I'm going to have to think about that a little bit more, but encourage you to go to the funding opportunity announcement and read those funding priority topics. They're several pages long, but I think you might find a space in there. You might find language in there that would lend itself to that kind of project. I'm not sure. I can't be more precise about that. I haven't thought about artificial intelligence tools to detect animal disease. I would say, just shooting from the hip, it's definitely in scope for NADPRP. It might not be super strongly aligned with this year's funding priority topics, but go look at those funding priority topics and see if you see a niche there for that kind of idea. Any other questions? Do you have any process questions? Okay, let's see. Isha, can funds be used to provide small incentives to the producers for participating in the study? I'm going to give a minute for maybe Laura or Andrea to answer that one. So can funds be used to provide small incentives to the producers for participating in the study? Because that's really related to our allowable and unallowable costs. Laura and Andrea, can you take that one?
Sure. Yeah, that's typically an unallowable cost, promotional or thank you materials, incentives to encourage participation, or similar costs. Those are considered unallowable by OMB. And of course, if you want to see that, that is actually in our guidelines for use of funds document, and there's a link to the CFR where you can read more about that.
Yeah, so that's a great idea, Isha, but I'm sorry that we can't use NADPRP funds for that, and that is not our rule, it's our OMB rules. Okay, well, will NADPRP support a project that develops vaccines against diseases of small ruminants, but conducts trials of the vaccine in an international location with international collaborators? Yes, that is possible. So again, I refer you to the funding opportunity announcement. So this project, because it's developing vaccine for small ruminants, as I said, this year's funding priority topics include commodity specific topics, which included the development and enhancement of vaccines for sheep and goats. So it sounds like this kind of proposal would work there. We have used NADPRP funds in the past to do trials on, for example, diagnostic tests was something that we funded last year, and some of that was done in international locations with international collaborators. So I think yes. Really good questions, everybody. Thank you so much. Okay. Whoops.
Can you clarify? This is Frank again. I think I heard correctly that in answer to Isha's question, can the funds be used to provide small incentives to producers for participating? And I think I heard you say no, like pretty decidedly no. But let's say that those funds, you know, that I think that means you couldn't just pay somebody $50 or something for doing a survey or for coming to a meeting or for taking their time. What about things like where you're convening meetings and part of the incentive is, hey, we'll offer you a steak dinner, and if you would just come and talk with us about things? Is that an incentive or is that hospitality?
Yeah, I'm so sorry, but we don't allow that use of funds for NADPRP.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I wish we could, because I would go to those too and have a steak dinner with you.
Well, thank you. We'll do it another time.
Yeah, another time. Thanks. Aquatic animal vaccine studies. Okay, that's a great question. If it's part, if you feel that you can align that proposal with the aquatic animal disease preparedness and prevention parts of our funding opportunity priority topics, I think probably yes. So again, I'm not an expert in every single topic area that we provide funding. So we have many, many experts in USDA, and we work with stakeholders to develop those. So sorry, I'm not, you know, in the weeds to know exactly or say for sure, and I keep referring you all in several of these questions to go really read the priority topics that are written in the funding opportunity announcement. I'm not trying to be discouraging at all, but just I'm not exactly sure. But I think that aquatic animal vaccine studies, if it can be tied to aquatic animal disease preparedness and or prevention and response for high consequence aquatic animal diseases, I think that could be possible. All right. Well, does anybody else have any other questions? Yeah, and that's Anne, when you said there, you know, follow up with the RFP contacts. Many of you might already know people in APHIS Veterinary Services. Maybe they're people in field ops or in our commodity health centers whom you work with. If so, you're very welcome to reach out to them too about this NADPRP funding opportunity. They are aware of what's in here. They may be able to help you as well, and especially in that aquatic issue, some of our APHIS Veterinary Services aquatic health team folks could probably help you specifically. Well, thank you all so much for attending. Thanks for patiently listening to all this, and we are so excited about this funding opportunity. We're really looking forward to seeing what proposals you submit. As I said earlier, if you have any questions at all as you go along, please first check our website because there's a lot of information out there. But also, if you have questions, send us an email at vs.nadprep@usda.gov. Thank you all.